So, this episode is a catch up to dive into those duplicate and near duplicate bottles and assign a number to them. Hello, and welcome to My Tiny Bottles, the project where I'm exploring my grandmother's legacy of miniature liquor bottles, one tiny bottle at a time. I'm your host, Tammy Coxon. As I've mentioned in previous episodes, everyone who bought bottles for Grandma's collection tried not to give her duplicates. But Grandma collected bottles for over 30 years, and that's a lot of bottles to remember. As I've gotten farther into the collection, I'm seeing more and more dupes, so I've had to think about what to do with them. The first one was in reveal number 10, a second bottle of B&B, aka Benedictine and Brandy. But as I investigated it, I realized that the bottle looked different, had a different proof, and was from a different era. So I just treated it like any other bottle, and it appeared as bottle 51. But then in reveal number 15, I picked up a second bottle of bottle number 4, Black Bottle Scotch. It was identical in every way, so I just set it aside. And since then, I've found a few more bottles that fit into one of these two categories. The fun thing about finding an extra bottle is that I get a second chance to taste it with someone. And if the timing goes right, like it was with those two B&B bottles, it can afford some really interesting side-by-side comparison opportunities. But it complicates my bookkeeping a little, because if I want to document all the bottles in Grandma's collection, then I have to count them all. So this episode is a catch-up to dive into those duplicate and near duplicate bottles and assign a number to them. It'll also give you a little peek into my research methods. One of the trends I've noticed when researching the bottles is that a lot of liqueurs were at a higher proof in the 70s or 80s and gradually dropped over time. This is great for dating a bottle, and it's how I was able to notice, even in the reveal video, that bottle number 111, Boggs Cranberry Liqueur, was different than my other bottle of Boggs, number 26. The new find was bottled at 40 proof or 20% ABV, compared to 12.5 on the previous bottle. I was able to date bottle 26 to 1989 based on a 2-digit code that usually shows up on the bottom of glass bottles made in the US. But there is no such code on number 111, so I'm left looking at other clues for dating, like the tax strip over the top. Now, this particular tax strip has been completely washed out from something leaking, but since US tax strips stopped being used in 1985, even though I can't read anything on it, it does give me a 1976 to 1985 date range for this bottle. I'm sad that I've already tasted its lower proof counterpart because this would have been an interesting comparison. That bottle was decidedly chunky, with what felt like little pieces of cranberry jelly in our mouths. This higher proof one seems to have held up better, so it will be a fun one to revisit. Based on my website analytics, it appears that I am currently the world expert on Boggs Cranberry Liqueur, so I'll get to add another bit to its story. Looking at labels is another great way to date a bottle, and I spent a ridiculous amount of time studying eBay ads in order to date bottle 10, Disaronno Amaretto, to between 1995 and 1998. This is why I knew right away that bottle 112, Amaretto Disaronno, was from another era. As I talked about in bottle 10, the brand's labels are a series of battles in the fight against all the other companies selling Amaretto, and today they've just ditched the word entirely and are just Disaronno. Between 1981 and 1990, the label of the product looked like mine, Amaretto Disaronno, with each word on a single line. Based on the fact that my bottle has percentage ABV and not proof, it's most likely from the end of the 80s when those rules changed. And alas, this is another one where I've already tasted my earlier bottle, so we will not be able to have a grand Disaronno taste-off. But it'll be a good comparison bottle for one of those Amaretto competitors, number 32, Seagram's Almondine, which also comes from the 1980s. Bottle 113 is a 200 milliliter flask of Jack Daniels, one of a few medium-sized bottles in the collection. Based on its tax strip, it's from between 1983 and 1985. This makes it from the same time period as its tiny counterpart, bottle 6. I tasted that bottle with Southern Teague, and it was pretty awful. But that bottle was also covered in a fine layer of something that looked like mold, so maybe this one will be better. Bottle number 114 is Jim Beam in a 200 milliliter flask, and it will offer a good opportunity for a side-by-side. Bottle 84, my tiny bottle version of Jim Beam, is from 1994 to 2006, bottled in plastic and quite evaporated. In my episode about it, I was sad that I wouldn't be able to properly compare it to modern-day Jim Beam, but now I can do that with both bottles. The bigger bottle dates from 1986 to 1987, which will be an interesting time period to taste bourbon from. And it's a glass bottle and quite full, which will make for a much more fair comparison. Bottle number 115, Opal Nera, was a great find, even if it is an exact duplicate of bottle 36. Between tasting that bottle with Eric Williams and finding this new one, I actually heard from its creator, Alessandro Francoli. And not only that, he sent me a bottle of the new version of Opal Nera that had been a mysterious part of the original episode. So now that I have a duplicate, I'll be able to do a really amazing side-by-side comparison, which I should really get to sooner rather than later. Subscribe so you don't miss it. I don't have any tiny bottles of Monet Cognac to hold up right now, but I do have this big one because I have already tasted bottle 79 Monet Cognac with the lovely folks at its current US importer, Heavenly Spirits. And I brought along its identical buddy, bottle 116, so we could see if there was any bottle-to-bottle variation. If you want to find out, be sure to check out the next episode, which will be that tasting. Going back to that first pure duplicate bottle of Black Bottle Scotch, I will now give it its own number, 117. As far as I can tell, it's identical to bottle 4, but that was totally delicious when I tasted it in Scotland, so I'm happy to have a chance to revisit that delightful experience. Now I'm caught up on my bookkeeping and no bottles are left unnumbered. If you want to know more about all the older bottles I talked about in this episode, check out the show notes for this episode, where you'll find links to all the bottles that I talk about. Or head on over to mytinybottles.com and find them there. They all have their own fun story waiting for you to explore. And of course, I'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment here, there, or on social media. I'm at TammyLC on Blue Sky and at MyTinyBottles on Instagram and Facebook. Cheers!